wellness revolution starts now.
Hello, I'm Dr. Steve Hotze. Welcome to today's program. It is going to be a most interesting and fascinating podcast interview I've done of any other individual, whether they're patients or doctors or public health individuals. I'm going to interview today Dr. Judy Morgan. She is a veterinarian. You might go, Dr. Hotze, why in the world on your medical podcast would you be interviewing a veterinarian? And I'm going to tell you, Judy Morgan, Dr. Judy Morgan, who lives in North Carolina now, grew up in New Jersey, was valedictorian of her high school class, which tells you she had some brains. She was smart. She went to Rutgers, graduated there in 1980. In 1984, she graduated from the University of Illinois Veterinary School. And she's been in the practice of veterinary medicine up until 2020, when she retired to do her organization called Natural Pets. Is that right?
Naturally Healthy Pets.
And she, much like me, I practice, even though I was an allopath, which means I was trained in conventional medicine to use drugs to treat symptoms and surgery to solve problems. I, over time, starting really back in 1988, 89, adopted natural approaches to health, which, as you all know, we do here at the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. Well, Judy had a similar transition in the practice of veterinarian medicine, and if there's a such thing as a naturopathic veterinarian, that's what I would call you, Judy. You may not agree with that, but you take natural approaches to health like I do, so there are strong similarities. Tell me, what led you to make the transition from conventional veterinary medicine, and I want you to describe what that is, and then to more natural, holistic approaches to treating pets?
Well, I graduated from University of Illinois in 1984. So Midwest, mid-'80s, we only had traditional medicine, which is prescription diets, prescription medication, and a bunch of vaccines. We have a lot more vaccines now than we did then, so it's gotten worse. So I practiced traditional medicine for the first 10 years, and I was pretty miserable. And I almost quit being a veterinarian because I just did not like what I was doing. I wasn't curing anything. I was just seeing a lot of chronic disease.
Let me interrupt you right there, because I'm going to interrupt you. Followed a very similar pathway. When I graduated from medical school in 1976, my father held a banquet for me at the Houston Club, and he turned to me over dinner at the banquet and said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Son, don't poison your patients like all the other doctors do." That planted a seed in my mind that gave birth to the Hotze Health and Wellness Center in '89. So I had the same experience seeing chronic problems over and over and treating them medicinally with pharmaceutical drugs and antibiotics and everything for recurrent and chronic sinus and bronchitis, et cetera. And so I thought about quitting medicine as well. And this may seem hard to believe, but my wife and I got down on our knees. We had 8 children at the time. And I said, "God, please help me find a way to help people get well, or go out. I'm an entrepreneur, and go out and let me start something else," because it was not satisfying treating all these people who stay chronically sick. And you had the same experience with your animals.
Yep, I absolutely did. And my life is what I call a series of fortunate accidents, but frankly, it's God putting things in front of me and saying, "Are you going to do this, or are you not going to do it?" And usually I say no about 20 times before I figure out what I'm supposed to do. But I ended up getting fired from that job that I hated so much. I ended up getting fired for being pregnant, which, try doing that nowadays. So
you got fired for being pregnant.
For being pregnant, yeah. So that was actually very fortunate for me, because I was really not happy with the traditional medicine. So I ended up being a partner in a practice, and my partner was very, very, very traditional. And I accidentally took a chiropractic course because I didn't know that that's what it was. and it was called something else. And about 3 hours into the course, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's talking about chiropractic care. I don't even know if I believe in this. But we paid for the course, so I stuck it out. And when I went back to work the next week, I started using what I had learned. I thought, well, I don't have anything to lose here. And I literally, the first patient that I did chiropractic care on was carried in the door and ran out the door.
Wow.
And I kind of did a double take and said, well, okay, what else is there? So I started seeing dramatic changes, and I said, well, this is pretty cool. So I started looking at other things, and the next thing that really hit me was acupuncture. And after I got really involved in doing traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, I learned about food therapy. And so that totally changed how I was dealing with my patients, because then I started to realize how toxic processed food is for our pets, just like people. And that really kind of set me off on the course to really wanting to do things differently. And I ended up splitting with my partner in the practice because he said, I don't think I understand the black magic voodoo that you are doing, and I don't want to be a part of it. And I said, that's fine, because I cannot do anymore what you are doing. And our practice, we had two practices, and they were 5 miles apart. He had the bigger one, and I bought him out of the smaller one so that I could do my voodoo by myself. And it worked out really well, and I got a lot of referrals, and it just started this whole path. And then I kind of jokingly said that I would write a book to write down all this stuff that I was learning. In 2013, the book was published in 2014. That was my first one, From Needles to Natural. And once I did that, I was like, oh, if you write a book, you actually have to promote the book. It doesn't just sell itself.
Right.
How naive was I? So then I started social media platforms, started doing podcasts, started doing all kinds of crazy things. And that was the beginning of Naturally Healthy Pets. So I've now written 10 books, and it's just become a path of education for me to empower pet parents to kind of get going on the right paw, so to speak.
Well, let me ask you, you published 10 books, and they can be purchased probably on Amazon, I would presume. Mm-hmm. And but you can also purchase them through your website, which is?
Yes. drjudymorgan.com. Really simple.
Dr. Judy Morgan, MORGAN.com, mm-hmm. and Judy is JUDY.
Yes.
Dr. Judy Morgan, without any periods.com. Yep. And you can go there and see her podcast, you can see her videos, and you can purchase her books. So let's talk about, I want to talk about vaccinations, because I'm very concerned. The COVID situation brought to light the detriments of vaccines, and there's a physician in the United States, numerous physicians, but Dr. Sherry Tenpenny has been warning about vaccines since the late 1990s and what's contained in vaccines for humans. And we've gone from giving just a few vaccines. When I was a young man, I think I took oral polio, and I think I had a polio shot, and we had DPT, and that was about it. And or tetanus shot, and we had no more. Now in humans, up to the age of 18, they have at least 80 different vaccines that are given to human beings, children, and even with hepatitis B given right at birth, which makes no sense whatsoever. So so once this came up, I started questioning my wife about vaccines and what are they doing to our dog? How many vaccines are they giving him to her? And my daughter thought my dog wasn't doing well, and I was at work, and she picked her up and took her into the doctor, and they gave him some vaccines and did some blood tests on him, and it turned out he was fine. But I said, what vaccines did they give him? And then I have been recently remarried, and my new bride's dog had been sick, and she took him over to the vets, and every time they took him over, they give the dog 3 or 4 vaccines. So talk to us about vaccines and what it's not going to be any different in dogs or pets than it is in humans. They still contain a lot of toxins. Talk to us about the toxic side effects the side effects of the toxins that are given in the vaccines to these pets.
There are a lot. And we probably, if we followed the recommendations, particularly the recommendations when I graduated for vaccinating our pets, they would get way more than 80 vaccines by the time they're 10 years old. So when you go in and they give one shot, that vaccine may have 7 or 8 different antigens in there. So usually it's a combination shot that has distemper, hepatitis, parvovirus, parainfluenza. It may have 4 serobars of leptospirosis in there. So that's all in that one syringe. You think, oh, he only got one shot. No, he actually just got like 9. Then we have Lyme vaccine, we have kennel cough vaccine, we have 2 different influenza vaccines. There's so many different things that are pushed on our pets. And the vaccines contain adjuvants, heavy metals, thimerosal, preservatives, a lot of different things. And it's the same dose of vaccination, whether you have a 2-pound teacup Yorkie or a 200-pound Great Dane. So it's based on the number of immune units in the vaccine, not the size of the animal. Mm-hmm. The problem is, and we know this for a fact, that a lot of these vaccines that for years and years and years have arbitrarily been assigned to be boosted every year may last a lifetime. So puppy vaccines, there's usually given, they really need a series of 2, but they end up getting a series of up to 7. I have seen crazy schedules where we're vaccinating them every 2 weeks, starting at 6 weeks, and they just keep going until they're 16 to 18 weeks old, which is just nuts. Distemper, parvo, hepatitis may last a lifetime. So giving boosters on those annually was just crazy. It's sort of like being pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't. You can, right. And the same with a vaccine. If you give a vaccination for distemper and the body makes antibodies to it,
it makes antibodies to it. You don't need to do it again.
Right. You don't get more immune by giving another vaccine on top of it. So we now know that those vaccines last 5 to 7 years or more. So now the powers that be, the AVMA and the American Animal Hospital Association, on their websites, they clearly state that the core vaccines, distemper, hepatitis, parvovirus, should be given no more often than every 3 to 5 years. But if we were to go out and poll veterinary clinics, we would find that 40 to 60% of them are still recommending annual vaccines, which is just crazy. So we have other vaccines like leptospirosis and kennel cough. They only last 9 to 12 months because they are bacterial or spirochete origin, not viral origin. So the immunity is not as good, and they're not very good vaccines, and they're highly reactive vaccines, particularly for small dogs. So if you have a small dog under 10 to 15 pounds, they're much more likely to have an adverse reaction, anaphylactic reaction, where they can't breathe, their face swells up, they vomit, they have diarrhea, and they pass out. So for small dogs in particular, you don't want to over-vaccinate, and you don't want to give a whole bunch of vaccines at one time. You want to spread them out. So our biggest problems come in, well, first of all, rabies is mandated by almost every municipality in the country. It's mandated every 3 years for dogs and cats. We have some veterinarians who give them every year or every 2 years, even though we know the rabies vaccine lasts a minimum of 3, and it's not required any more often than every 3 years. But again, one vaccine for rabies may last a lifetime. Our biggest problem is boarding, grooming, daycare. They require usually a laundry list of vaccines
That's
to be able
right.
to drop your dog off. So that's a huge problem. And then we have the problem with cats. Cats like to make tumors when we give them vaccines. So back in the late 1980s, I actually was working in Pennsylvania when this problem arose, that we had a rabies outbreak in Pennsylvania. It was carried by raccoons mostly, but also skunks and foxes. And so the state made a mandate that every cat needed to be vaccinated for rabies every single year because they wanted to put an end to it. And cats are free roaming.
Right.
The problem is all the house cats got in and got vaccinated every year. The barn cats, the stray cats, they didn't get vaccinated. So we were vaccinating the wrong cohort of patients.
You weren't vaccinating the feral cats. You were vaccinating the domesticated cats.
So what happened is the University of Pennsylvania and the University of California at Davis, their veterinary diagnostic laboratories, a year or two after this, over vaccination of all these cats, started getting tumors submitted that were fibrosarcomas that were secondary to the vaccines. And we've had thousands and thousands of cats that have died from these tumors. And we used to just, and a lot of veterinarians still do, grab the scruff over the neck, poke the vaccine in, or grab up over the loin and poke the vaccine under the skin. The problem with these tumors is they send out little fingers and it's impossible to get clean margins. So in response to this, instead of saying, hey, we shouldn't vaccinate as much, what they've said is, hey, you should give that rabies vaccine low on the right hind leg. So if they make a tumor, we can amputate the leg. So in the spirit of getting everybody vaccinated, we're now cutting off body parts. Just pretty horrible. I have a huge problem with over-vaccination of our animals. Dogs will make tumors secondary to vaccines as well. They just don't do it as often as cats do. So there's a lot of reasons to keep our vaccine schedule. If you're going to vaccinate it all, which unfortunately a lot of it is mandated, then we need to look at what is the schedule that makes the most sense. And the schedule that makes the most sense is minimizing vaccines. And the other thing that is often overlooked, directly on the vaccine label in the drug insert, it says to be given to healthy animals for the prevention of XYZ. How many of our pets are truly healthy? Pets that are undergoing chemotherapy for cancer, that's not a healthy pet. But right. The oncologist will gladly state, oh, no, if they're due for their vaccines, you can go ahead and give them. To me, that is malpractice. That is very bad medicine. That's not a healthy pet. How many of our pets are struggling with chronic allergies, chronic inflammatory bowel disease, chronic arthritis, chronic endocrine diseases? And there's a lot of reasons for all of that as well. But then we poke them with vaccines, stimulate their immune system some more, and we are seeing more and more autoimmune disease, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, autoimmune thrombocytopenia, which is where they're killing off their platelets and bleeding to death. So we need to look critically. And frankly, I will tell you that there are veterinarians who are vaccinating animals with autoimmune disease and not paying attention to the fact that that is not a healthy animal. That animal should not be getting a vaccine. So my animals are very minimally vaccinated. And I will tell you, especially since COVID and my mistrust of the whole vaccine industry has just quadrupled. And I think vaccines have done some good over time, but we've gone way too far.
Well, we know that vaccines in humans have caused a whole host of health problems that now is being revealed through the work of RFK Jr. Kennedy Jr. is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Dr. Peter McCullough and others have written books about the dangers of vaccines, as well as Sherry Tenpenny. And now this is in humans. And, for crying out loud, the pets that we have are mammals. And so the physiology and the biology is going to be very similar. So we'd expect to have, not only do we have problems in humans when they take too many vaccines, we're seeing the similar problems in pets when they take these vaccines.
Absolutely.
So I've wondered, this is a question I've had on rabies. If you have a house pet, why do you need to have why do you even need to give a rabies? I know it's mandated, but what's the odds?
That's the only reason we need to. Here's the one scenario where my indoor cats, maybe I'd want a rabies vaccine, but I don't want them to get it every year or every 3 years.
Right.
I mean, they just don't need it. But if a bat gets in your house, and we do have bat rabies in this country, if a bat gets in your house, and let's say you wake up in the morning, and I've had this happen, you find a dead bat on the floor, and you've got indoor cats.
Now,
There's
where
no
you
way to
living?
know.
I've never had a bat in my house. How in the world?
I've only had it once. I think it came down the chimney.
There you go. That's
I'm
possible.
pretty sure my cats killed it. But so the question is, what if that was a rabid bat?
Yeah.
You would never know if it bit the cat, because I don't know what you know about bat bites, but they are little tiny razors, and they don't leave any kind of a mark.
Right.
My aunt and uncle had a bat get in their bedroom in the middle of the night, and in New Jersey, and they ended up having to go through rabies prophylaxis because the bat never got caught, and there was no way to know if they possibly could have been bitten by the bat.
Right.
So that is the one scenario where it's sort of like, and it depends on the lifestyle of your animal. If you have a hunting dog and you're out in the field and you're in a rabies endemic area, maybe you want to have them vaccinated. Right. I will say, when I lived in New Jersey and I was working in New Jersey and Pennsylvania during the rabies outbreak, it was a little crazy. I did have one of my clients who's a farmer sent his little Pomeranian out to do its last potty of the evening. It was like 10 o'clock at night. He heard this ruckus. He opened the door, and the dog came running in the back door with a raccoon attached to its back leg.
Uh-oh.
And thank God he was an old farmer who, thinking on his feet, and he actually grabbed a kitchen knife and slashed the throat of the raccoon to get it off the dog. It was a rabid raccoon. Whoa. So he and his wife and the dog all ended up getting rabies prophylaxis. So, it's real. And we definitely had a problem during the early 90s in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So it really depends where you live, what the exposure is. And I get why they mandate it, because rabies is a zoonotic disease and it's not treatable. Right.
So rabies is an important vaccine for pets to have.
Depending on where you live. And, the thing is, we can do titers. We can get a blood test, and that blood test can tell us, hey, look, he's got all these antibodies against the rabies virus. So, he's protected. We don't need to give him a booster. But I think that one state, I believe Delaware, will accept titers. Nowhere else will.
And so let's just take for granted every pet probably should have rabies shots. So we won't argue
somewhere
that
along
point.
The way.
We won't argue that point. How many of the other vaccines are really critical in pets, dogs, cats particularly?
Again, it really depends where you live. So I live on a farm. I have 24 acres. I have 7 outdoor cats. They had one distemper vaccine when they were about 5 months old, and they had a rabies vaccine. That's all I give them. I don't give them leukemia vaccines. I don't give them any of the other crazy things, because even though they're outdoors, we don't have a bunch of stray cats that come around. So I'm not worried about it. My indoor cats, forget it. They haven't seen vaccines in a long time. They just don't have any exposure. For your dogs, it's really going to depend, again, what are you doing with them? Do you live in a high-rise apartment in New York City? Do you live out in the country with your dogs hunting through ponds and woods and streams? They're going to have totally different exposures.
I see.
So there are some vaccines that I would never give. I'm not a fan of leptospirosis vaccine. Lepto is zoonotic, so that's, again, a problem where it could be spread to people potentially. In 36 years in practice, I had 4 cases of lepto, so not something we see a lot of. At one point, all over the news, and the news media is one of the biggest problems that we have. there was a lepto outbreak in northern New Jersey, in Jersey City, right outside of New York City.
Right.
And so they, it's all over the news for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, get your dogs vaccinated for lepto. And we actually had a local clinic that had a drive-through vaccination clinic on a Saturday. They charged $10 a vaccine, no exams, didn't ask when the last time the dog was vaccinated. You didn't have to be a client. You literally drove through, they reached in through your car window and poked your dogs. Stupidest thing ever done, but it was a media thing. So the outbreak in Jersey City was 4 cases. So 4 cases out of how many tens of thousands of dogs live in that city, but it became a huge media frenzy, which of course the vaccine companies want this. So the vaccine companies kind of keep track and they're like, oh, there's a big outbreak. So recently they've been saying, oh, there's a big outbreak in California. I don't know how many cases there have been, but I can guarantee you it's not thousands of dogs. But they are pushing heavily for everybody to run in and get a booster vaccine. So people need to think critically and ask questions like, well, how big is this outbreak? And, what was the lifestyle of those dogs? And where was that in relation to what my dog is doing?
If you've got an indoor dog, for crying out loud, in a bucket, he's not going to get leptospirosis,
Right. So lepto became a big problem during COVID because the rats spread lepto, and the rat population in New York City was out of control. And so if I had a dog in New York City during all of that craziness with the rat population being nuts, I wouldn't have vaccinated, but I would put boots on my dog when I walked him outside.
I got you. So let's talk about food for pets, food for dogs, cats in particular. There are a lot of other type of pets, but we're going to talk about mammals. We're not going to talk about lizards, people that have lizards and snakes. I'm sorry.
I don't do scaly things, although I do have a lot of chickens. So,
So anyway, tell us about proper dietary treatment of dogs and cats and other mammals that are pests to keep them healthy. What do you recommend?
So all of my animals are raw fed. They either eat raw or gently cooked food. Cats in particular are obligate carnivores. They are meatosauruses and they need to eat meat. When we look at highly processed food, aka dry kibble that's been extruded, which was invented by the Kellogg's. Thank you, Kellogg brothers.
Now, what is kibble? What is kibble? It's a cereal.
Kellogg's cereal company.
Yes, but
so they invented the extrusion process to make cereal flakes, and so that's used in the pet food industry to make the little dead brown balls of food. And the problem with that is that it's cooked at very, very high temperatures, and the ingredients are heated multiple times. So we end up with what are called AGEs, advanced glycation elements. So we end up with a lot of toxic things that happen when it goes through all of that cooking. The other problem with the extrusion process is it only works if the kibble has a high starch content. So
what is a kibble? What is the kibble?
Kibble is dry pet food. So stuff you pour out of a bag.
Okay.
So it's got a very high carbohydrate content. Well, cats are obligate carnivores. They're supposed to be eating meat. When we feed them dry food that's made with corn and soy and wheat and has, some chicken byproducts in there, we are feeding a lot of starch that the cats just really don't process very well. So we end up with obese cats that are diabetic and have bad teeth. Dogs do a little bit better with it because they are not obligate carnivores. They're more of a facultative carnivore, which means, they can survive on a vegetarian diet. They don't do well, they don't thrive, but they can do it. Cats really are bad at it. So we see a lot of health problems with cats who are fed incorrectly.
I want to mention something to you about my Labrador, Silver Lab. Crazy as it may sound, he enjoys apples. He'll eat an apple.
Yeah.
I mean, and he'll eat tangerines, and I'll give him he'll see me eating cantaloupe. I'll give him a piece or two of cantaloupe. He just gobbles it down.
Perfect.
I mean, he loves human food, and so he turns his nose up. We have, as I mentioned to you, bison food is what dried bison beef. Now, how would that be?
So bison's great. I mean, we can feed just about any protein source to our pets.
Even dry. I mean, what about dried bison beef? I know you like to feed them raw meat, but
so if you're feeding freeze dried or air dried meat that is just the meat, that's fine. It's when it gets put into a kibble and we add in, when we make it into a dry, dead brown ball, and we add in all the starches that we get into trouble.
The one we use is supposed to be just bison beef. I don't know what they do to keep it attached. They got to put something in it.
Yeah, there are some air dried formulas that kind of have more of a kibble type texture, but it's not just that.
Right.
So our pets do need a fiber source for their gut health. Right. So things like apples and melons are great fiber sources for them. So when I formulate diets for cats, they're going to be about 94 to 96% meat, bone, and organ. And then the other 4 to 6% is going to be some vegetable matter for that fiber source and some of the B vitamins that we need for them. For dogs, we're going to use more vegetable matter because they can tolerate it, they can utilize it, and they need it for that gut health. So we still have a high percentage of meat, bone, and organ. And when we're using bone, so we're either using a bone meal or we're using a ground bone source that is finely ground. If they're being raw fed, then the bone can be pretty big. If they're being gently cooked, if it's a cooked food, we can't cook bone. It becomes very, very brittle unless we grind it into a powder. But they do need a calcium source. So I've written three cookbooks for dogs using traditional Chinese veterinary medicine food therapies. So using food to treat different things. And I'm really a stickler for having those diets be species appropriate. So a species appropriate diet for our dogs and cats is going to be a very high meat diet. It is going to have some vegetable matter. I don't use grains, and there's a lot of controversy over the grain thing causing heart disease. They don't need grains. They have zero requirement for grains. When your veterinarian tells you you've got to add grains to their diet, you do not. They do not need them. The dogs can eat them. They don't need them. It is a huge myth.
Here's a question I have for you. And just to let you know what I do with my dog and myself, I feed him raw egg. What do you think? Huh?
Great.
And I also take 2 raw eggs every day myself with cod liver oil every day. And I have our housekeeper comes from Honduras, and she talked about, I was feeding my dog eggs, and she said, dogs just love eggs. And we had to watch them because when our chickens would lay, they'd be out there eating those eggs, all gone. And of course, I got calcium from the egg too, I guess, but because I ate it whole. And she said, and my granddaddy ate 2 eggs, raw eggs, every day, and he lived to be 105, and he never saw a doctor.
Eggs are actually an almost complete food source for our pets. It's one of the best things you can feed. So I said I live on a farm. Well, we raise chickens for meat and for eggs. We also consume a lot of raw dairy because we have Jersey cows.
Right.
And I make a ton of yogurt. I have yogurt going almost every day. And some of that is for the cats and dogs. And our chickens actually love the whey that comes off the yogurt and comes off from making the cheese. So we're recycling everything that we use. But all of that is so healthy for our animals. It's sort of like what Kennedy has said for people. Let's get back to eating whole fat,
let's get back
real
to
foods.
Really.
we need to be doing the same exact thing for our pets rather than giving them this highly processed food. I mean, frankly, most of the highly processed food from the big three companies that veterinarians are recommending is equivalent to us eating McDonald's or highly processed food all the time.
If it's packaged.
It's not giving good health to our pets. And that's why we have all of this chronic disease. It's the wrong food, the over-vaccination, and oh my gosh, the chemicals that we're throwing at these animals are crazy.
Now, I have a ranch too outside of Houston. We have 80 chickens, and we just have tons of eggs all the time. We're giving them to family and friends now, and they range feed them, and the dogs absolutely love. My dogs absolutely love that. But you mentioned that you gave raw meat also to your dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you do that. When you say you give raw meat, what kind of raw meat do you give?
So I'm a huge believer in rotating proteins. So they might have rabbit or chicken or beef or bison or quail, pheasant, you name it, lamb.
How do you give it to them? Is it cooked or uncooked?
No, it's raw. I feed completely raw. Although I do, sometimes they have gently cooked. I go back and forth. Everything that I feed them, they end up with a complete and balanced diet. So I know what supplements I need to add in, or, what I need to put it together. But I also have about 10 pet food companies that make raw or gently cooked complete formulas that I absolutely love. That list is available on my website.
And that website again is drjudymorgan.com. Judy, drjudymorgan.com. I'm going to be interested to look at that. I have a friend of mine who had a German Shepherd, and they fed that German Shepherd raw chicken every day, bones and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where they're getting their calcium source.
Now, and you mentioned when you cook a bone, particularly chicken bones, they become brittle, and that can cause problems. They can choke on that. But
they can choke and it can perforate the bowel. So,
but apparently,
we definitely don't want to do that.
But apparently, it's not that way if they're raw.
Right. Bones are actually pretty soft if they're raw. And they're very good for working the teeth and gums. So when we look at raw-fed dogs, especially those who are eating raw meaty bones like the chicken backs or the wings, they have very, very beautiful teeth, beautiful dental health, oral health. Kibble-fed animals, that kibble does nothing good for the teeth, is actually very bad because of all those starches. Starches break down to sugars. It would be like your dentist saying to you, hey, just go eat a dry bowl of Cheerios and some Ritz crackers and don't ever brush your teeth. They'll be fine. That would be crazy. And we would look at them like they were crazy. Yet we're told in the veterinary world, oh, just give them dry kibble. It's good for their teeth. No, it's not. It's really bad.
Well, that's interesting. So let me just ask you about raw chicken. You could literally buy raw chicken at the store, and you just take and cut off pieces of it and give it to them.
You could, but here's an interesting factoid. The FDA has zero tolerance for bacteria in raw pet food because they know it's going to be fed raw. The poultry that you buy in the grocery store for human consumption is highly contaminated with bacteria because they assume that you will cook it to a certain temperature.
Sure.
Now, our dogs have a much more acidic stomach pH than we do, which is why they could get, they eat roadkill, but they can get away with it because of that very, very acidic stomach pH that kind of kills off a lot of stuff. So I'm not a huge fan of going to the grocery store for the meat for my pets. I actually source it from really high quality pet food companies. So the other thing is that meat that is raised free range, grass fed, is going to have a much lower bacteria count than confinement raised meat. And in the grocery store, unfortunately, you're almost always buying confinement raised poultry or beef or whatever meats you're getting there. So it's going to be much more contaminated. Like I said, your dog will get away with it. It's not going to cause a problem for them. Just make sure you clean really well.
the other thing, I'm curious about eating raw meats. What about parasites?
That's not a problem.
Parasites in the raw meat.
Not a problem. Again, it's sourcing. So are you sourcing meats from really poor quality? Where, are you sourcing meats that have been USDA inspected and condemned? Those are going to be nasty. But stuff in the grocery store is not loaded with parasites. That's been USDA inspected and passed in order to get into the grocery stores. So with the raw pet food companies, it's just like anything else. There are great companies, there are good companies, and there are really bad companies.
And you've got a list of those on your website, drmorgan.com.
drjudymorgan.com, yes. And another really good resource for people is truthaboutpetfood.com. It's my friend Susan Thixton, and she puts out a list every year where from the pet food companies who would like to get on the list, they have to submit all their bills of lading for every single ingredient that has gone into their pet food and how it's raised, whether it's grass-fed, pasture-raised, humanely raised, whether it's organic. And in order to get on her list of approved foods, they have to pass all these different levels.
And this is Truth About Pet Food.
Truthaboutpetfood.com.
The singular pet. Truthaboutpetfood.com.
Truthaboutpetfood.com. Susan Thixton. It's a few bucks to get the list, but it's totally worth it because she puts a lot of work into it. There's usually about 40 companies on her list. Some are raw, some are gently cooked. There may be a kibble on there. There's some canned foods on there. And she even breaks it down cost per day to feed, so that if you are on a budget, you can look at it and say, okay, well, my dog is this big. It's going to cost this much per day to feed my pet. What can I afford? And for people who are, really budget conscious and they're like, I just can't get away from dry kibble because it's what I can afford, then add as much fresh food to the bowl as you possibly can. So whether that's eggs, steamed vegetables, little bits of meat. Don't give them cooked bones. Don't give them the skin and the grease and all that stuff that's going to cause problems for them. Feed them. If you're eating healthy, feed them healthy. So put a little yogurt on the healthy yogurt without all the sugars. No artificial sweeteners for our pets. They're very dangerous. Fresh blueberries, strawberries, no grapes. Those are the kind of things. Mushrooms are like a superfood for people and for our pets. So those are the kind of things that you can just add to the bowl. My dogs would sit and eat a salad if I gave them a salad because it's good, healthy food. My goal would be to have all pets eating human grade food, something that I would eat myself. Right. I think for too long, our pets have become the repository for the waste from the human food industry. Mm-hmm. And that is not a good thing.
Tell me, what about canned meat? Is there any?
So it depends. It depends on the company and the sourcing.
But so you can't, but there are some good sources of canned beef.
Absolutely. There are some good canned pet food companies. We had a recall and a huge lawsuit a few years ago from a canned food from a company that on their website said it was USDA inspected meats that were in their canned food. They left out the word inspected and condemned, and the meat actually had euthanasia solution in it. A woman in California fed her 5 dogs. They all fell over immediately after eating the food. 1 died, and the other 4 did recover. And it was because there was euthanasia solution in that meat in a high enough quantity that her dog actually died from it.
Why in the world that would happen?
Big lawsuit. So are there good canned food companies? Yes. Are there bad companies? You betcha.
Well, Doctor, this has been a very interesting discussion, and I really want to commend you. By the way, I know you've got 100,000, 200,000 followers on your website on drjudymorgan.com, and I want to encourage those of you that have pets and want your pets to be healthy and live long lives. By the way, give me some mortality statistics on dogs lifespans, how they were maybe 50 years ago and what they are today? Has there been any change at all?
Yeah, horrible change. In the 1970s, the average lifespan for a medium-sized dog like a golden retriever was 17. It's now 9 to 10. We've cut their lifespan in half by giving them way more vaccines than they need, by feeding them processed food that is just absolutely horrible, and all the chemicals that we're throwing at them, all the pesticides that we feed them and put on them. And I mean, would you feed your child a pesticide tablet to keep them from being bitten by mosquitoes? It makes no sense at all, but that's what we're doing to our pets, and we need to kind of go backwards a little bit.
And what about these drops that you put on your dogs for fleas?
Yeah, so those have gotten way out of control in the past 10, 12 years. And studies in Europe, it's interesting, I was on a podcast with somebody from Europe earlier today, and there's studies that show that every river in England is contaminated with fipronil, which is the chemical in a lot of those topical drops. And the rivers are contaminated because the dogs have these chemicals on them, and then they're swimming in the rivers and people are washing their dogs and it's going down the drains. They tested the hair of children in France, and all of the children have fipronil in their hair.
Oh my goodness.
So we are poisoning our pets, we're poisoning our environment, we're poisoning our children. These things are extremely toxic. They are neurotoxins. And we've had hundreds of thousands of reports of deaths, seizures, tremors, neurologic problems. And we had a call with FDA and we said, when are you going to recall these things? When is enough enough? And they said, we haven't had enough reports. And I said, wow, 200,000 reports is not enough reports. And we know that probably only 1% of adverse reactions actually get reported to the FDA. So if 1% is 200,000, then what are the real numbers?
No,
this is crazy.
Is this 200,000 pets?
Yeah. No. But we do see problems with, so part of the problem, especially, well, with any of it. So here's another fun study. They took 3 dogs. They gave 0 flea and tick medications. The second one, they put a topical on. And the third one, they gave an oral insecticide. They put the 3 dogs in a wading pool for a few minutes. And then they tested the blood and urine of all 3 dogs after they had commingled in the little pool. And what they found is that all 3 dogs ended up with the chemicals from the topical and the oral medication. So the dog who was given nothing ended up with the chemicals in his system. So that tells us that you put these things on your dog or your cat, and then your children are sleeping with them and hugging them and kissing them. Your children are being exposed to these chemicals as well. And this is so not good.
And what is that? What is the chemical that's used in the anti-flea medication?
Oh, there's a bunch of different ones. So fipronil is one of them.
How do you spell that?
FIPRINIL. Fipronil, RONIL. The newer ones are the isoxazolines. So that's Bravecto, Credelio, Simparica, NexGard. And what they do, so one company will come out with a product and say, oh, this prevents fleas and ticks, which they don't prevent anything because the fleas and ticks actually have to bite the animal to get the chemical. So it doesn't keep them off your animal. They just have to get bitten. It keeps your house from being infested, maybe. So, one company will come out and say, oh, well, this prevents fleas and ticks. So the next company says, oh, well, we've got to have a better label claim than them. We're going to add something that'll prevent heartworms too. So they combine 2 toxic chemicals. And then the next company comes along and says, oh, well, if we put another chemical in there with it, now we can prevent intestinal parasites too. So they just keep loading them on until we are giving this toxic soup to our pets, just it's
impacting humans because it's in them, and
it's impacting everybody, and it's also impacting our environment. So the metabolites of these things are passed in the urine, They're passed in the stool. They go into the soil. How is this affecting our soil microorganisms and, insects? We know that some of these are highly toxic to aquatic animals, and this is going into the streams.
Right.
So
and we're eating them. We're eating the fish that have all these
we
toxins.
need to get away from this. And, again, it's not one size fits all. Your dog who lives in an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan does not need to be given monthly flea and tick chemicals. Sorry, doesn't have any exposure. Why are we promoting that?
Right.
The National Parasite Council for veterinarians recommends every animal every month all year long on some sort of pesticide prevention. How does that make sense? It makes no sense at all.
Well,
sorry, I got on my soapbox.
No, I think I totally agree with you. And of course, it's the same way in humans. Humans take all these various drugs and chemicals, and they urinate them out or excrete them out through their bowels, goes into the sewer, gets into the water, everywhere. So we've got all these xenoestrogens, which adversely affect hormone production in humans and causes a host of health problems. So we're literally poisoning ourselves to death, which
exactly.
And all in the name of profits for these various pharmaceutical companies that are promoting this. So I commend you for, really addressing this head on and showing the fallacy in the thinking and why we don't need all these drugs, not only in humans, as I would say, but we don't need all these drugs in our pets and our animals, because it affects the entire environment, and it's harmful not only to them, it's also harmful to the humans that take care of them. One other question I have for you, tell me about ivermectin, or what you would recommend, if it's even necessary, for heartworms in, say, dogs or cats.
So heartworms are pretty much a dog problem.
Okay.
They're pretty rare in cats because they're not the species host that heartworms like. We see them occasionally, but so I have never recommended heartworm prevention in cats. Heartworm prevention for dogs is extremely variable. Do you live in an environment where it's mosquito crazy? So you can actually look at the American Heartworm Society maps that will show you the incidence of heartworm in the United States. And so Colorado, heartworms, very rare. They just don't have them. They don't have a big mosquito problem. They don't have a flea problem. It's just, why would we give chemicals all year round when it's pretty rare? Northern half of the country, it gets so cold in the winter that we don't have mosquitoes out. We can't spread heartworms. Why would we give chemicals when it's frozen tundra?
Right.
If you live in the South, particularly the Southeast, bigger problem with mosquitoes. You'll see that the heartworm map is a little crazy in the Southeast. Again, it depends on your pet's lifestyle. How much time do they spend outside? Do you live near pond, lake, stream, in the woods where the mosquitoes are going to be much more active? So on my farm, we have about 20 acres that's cleared, and we are surrounded by a ring of woods with a small stream. If I go down in the woods, the mosquito population is nuts. If I stay in my bright, sunny yard, I don't have a mosquito problem. My dogs stay in my bright, sunny yard. They don't go down in the woods. In the evening, when the mosquitoes come out, as soon as I see mosquitoes, it's like, okay, we're all going inside, or I'm going to use an essential oil, non-toxic spray on me and them if we want to stay outside for a little while. So I treat it very differently than most people in my area. I do live in the Southeast. I do test my dogs for heartworms every year. Everybody stays negative because they have minimal exposure. So it really, again, depends on your pet's exposure. And this is why you need to, this is one of my big things on my education is teaching people how to have these conversations with their veterinarian and really analyzing the risk for your specific pet. Don't ever accept the one size fits all. Oh no, every dog has to be on heartworm preventative every month, all year long. Not necessarily. What is your dog's exposure? What is your dog's lifestyle? Where does he go? What does he do? And that goes for every vaccine as well. You need to have a conversation about, and I go through this in a couple of my books, going through each vaccine, how the virus is, or whatever, is spread. What are the risk factors? And, what are the exposure levels? How long does the vaccine last? Because that's knowledge. That's information that empowers people to say, well, geez, my dog doesn't ever go to the groomer. Why would he need to have a kennel cough vaccine? So, the same with the parasite prevention, et cetera. It's what is your dog's lifestyle? What is their risk? And treat them as an individual and make decisions on an individual basis.
What type of medication is used for heartworms?
So there's a couple different ones. The original, well, when I graduated, we were giving daily medication, but the ivermectin was the first monthly, and it's pretty safe, and especially in the doses that it's used for heartworm prevention. We do have one gene mutation in certain breeds that tend to be a little bit more sensitive to that. The second one that came out is milbomycin, and that's in Interceptor. The ivermectin is in Iberheart, HeartGuard. Those are monthly, and those are pretty safe. A newer one that's being used a lot that is not safe at all is moxidectin, and that's being combined in some of those topicals that we were talking about.
Right.
It's also being used as an injectable called ProHeart. They have ProHeart 6, which is an injection that lasts 6 months. When it first came out, it actually was one of the few drugs that was so bad it got pulled off the market because it killed way too many dogs. It came back on the market a few years later with no changes to the formulation. The only change was that the veterinarians were supposed to hand the clients an information sheet before the injection was given, saying, hey, here's the possible side effects. And then, just to make matters worse, once they got that approved, they tripled the dose in the injection, and now it's ProHeart 12. And so it's a once-a-year injection for heartworm prevention. And people think, oh, well, how convenient is this? It's real convenient as long as your dog isn't one of the ones that has the neurotoxic side effects or dies. I do not recommend that at all. Moxidectin is very dangerous for our dogs.
Well, listen, this has been a very intriguing and interesting discussion about natural approaches in veterinary medicine for dogs, cats, and other mammals. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your work, Dr. Judy Morgan. For more information, give her a phone. Go to her website, Dr. Judy, Judy Morgan, MORGAN.com, drjudymorgan.com, for more information, for YouTubes, for podcasts, and for other recommendations you can read online. Dr. Morgan, I congratulate you for going down a path less traveled and introducing us to natural approaches to health in our pets. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
At Physicians Preference Pharmacy, we believe that personalized medical treatment and customized medications are the best way to help you achieve your healthcare goals. Sometimes this requires adjusting the dosage form of the medication from something like an oral capsule to a tablet which dissolves underneath the tongue. This is called a sublingual tablet. Sub meaning under, lingual meaning tongue, under the tongue. And there are several reasons why your doctor may want your medications to be custom-made into a sublingual tablet. Perhaps you have trouble swallowing capsules or difficulty absorbing medications. With sublingual tablets, you still get the treatment you need in a way that is effective for you. Tablets made here at Physicians Preference Pharmacy are designed to dissolve fully under the tongue in just a few minutes and offer an additional option for you to achieve your healthcare goals.
information provided on this program is neither intended nor implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice and is not intended to replace the services of a physician, nor does it constitute a doctor-patient relationship. You should not use information from this radio program to diagnose or treat a health problem or disease without consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. If you have or suspect you have an urgent medical problem, promptly contact a professional healthcare provider or call 911. Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution advises you to always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider prior to starting any new treatment or with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Any application of the recommendations from this program is at the listener's discretion.